So we are here today with Chris Vermeulen. Chris is founder of thetechnicaltraders.com, thetechnicaltraders.com. I'll put a link to that in the comments below so you guys can go there and visit Chris's company and website, everything. They have some great products and training and services there that you definitely want to check out. So Chris is going to talk to us today about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency, crypto asset markets, and what we can look for, what we can expect. We got a little bit of movement, a little bit of price action today. So perfect timing. Chris, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So what are you seeing? What do we need to be on the lookout for? I know we're coming into a big weekend and we've had some movement here lately with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, one of your recent videos you just put out yesterday, I mean, you really nailed it. You did a really good, you said you're not a technical analyst or chartist, but you definitely are. You've got a really good chart. But we can jump into the charts and I can show you. I'm in alignment with what you're seeing. I think that's what everyone really needs to understand, is because the markets are set up in a way that, you know, people are expecting fast action with Bitcoin, and that might not be the case. This is the daily chart of Bitcoin, but just to look at the big picture, since 2010, Bitcoin has had 6 rallies and 6 bubbles that have burst. And each time the average sell-off has been about 74%. One of them was 93%. Another one was like 67%, something like that. But what we're seeing right now in Bitcoin, from, you know, $66,000 down to $30,000, I mean, really, it's only a 54% correction. To me, I still think there's more downside. This is perfectly normal for the way Bitcoin works. It's got a certain group of followers that create these bubbles. It's got more media, more traditional investors or traders moving into it, which is why when it starts to get momentum, it creates this bubble pattern that eventually bursts. And then it typically takes a full year or more for price to consolidate, finish selling off, put in a bottom, and then start to climb a hill and work itself out of it. And that's where we are right now. We've fallen down to this 30,000 mark. It's consolidating on this chart. When we take a look here, there's still quite a bit more potential downside. The big question here is, are we going to see Bitcoin trade sideways in a range between more or less 30,000 and somewhere up here around 59,000, trade somewhere in that range for a year or two, consolidate, build a base, kind of people fall out of favor, they give up on it. That's what creates a bottom in these long-term patterns. Has to trade long enough that all these really aggressive traders who constantly want to be doubling their money, you know, every couple of weeks, they get bored pretty quick. So eventually, within a year or so, they kind of give up on Bitcoin. You know, most of them piled in the last few months up near the highs, and now they're all underwater. So Bitcoin leaves a bitter taste in the average Joe's portfolio in their mouth, because they usually pile on late and then they wait for recovery that never happens. I talked about back in April and May how we were forming what looked to be a complacency stage, a bearish pattern on the chart. In fact, if I was to just pull up this graph right here, I can quickly show you what I was looking at. We're looking at this complacency time in the market right here, where we saw Bitcoin have this huge sharp drop. A lot of damage was done on that big drop that we had. It broke 2 previous support levels on the chart. Typically, if we break 2 previous lows, the trend has changed. Not only that, but it fell pretty dramatic, over 20%, which is enough to trigger, you know, you could say, okay, this uptrend is done. Not only are we now making lower lows, but it's corrected more than 20%. Generally, as looking at it as a stock market investor, usually a correction of more than 20% says, you know what, we're more or less starting potentially a bear market here. Anyways, we created this complacency stage April, May, and I was talking about how this is just the start. If this breaks down, Bitcoin is going to 30,000, potentially $16,000 a coin. And so right now we have broken down and we are somewhere stuck in this anxiety or this denial stage. I don't know if we've seen the panic yet. We're kind of just hanging on this limb, which, if I was to just snap back to this chart real quick, we've had this complacency stage right here, and then we've dropped down, and now it's chattering. It's trying to find stability. And if I was to go back to this chart, This is where we broke down. It's chattering. It's trying to find stability. Everyone seems to think it's put in a bottom, it's going higher, which to me says, you know what? They're all about to have a really rude awakening because we're probably going to collapse. It's going to have a couple big drops and pops on the way down. But until we get to a bigger panic sell-off around 16,000, maybe 20,000, I think that's when we're going to see a real opportunity. So I'm really excited to see 20 or 16,000 on Bitcoin. To me, it's actually a really good sign. That will bring us down to correction levels that we've seen Bitcoin do 6 times in the past. So it'd be normal. It would also be a technical measured move to the downside based on the size of the recent drops and the selling patterns. 16,000 is going to be a really good support level, and that'll put us down into this bottom stage. And then from there, it's a great opportunity to get in long term. It'll build a base for a while. And then, late this year, maybe next year, it starts to climb its way up and repeat a whole new cycle to the upside. So that's kind of the big picture of Bitcoin. And you get an idea of this kind of collapse if we really look at the monthly chart of Bitcoin. Now, futures don't go back very far, which is this platform, but you can see how it's just gone parabolic. In fact, I think if we take a look over at the trading view, you can see how it's gone this parabolic spike and how it's coming back down. And I tell subscribers all the time, this happens in individual stocks, happens on sectors, happens with other commodities. What goes straight up when the media and everyone piles in usually comes straight back down for halfway, at least halfway, if not almost the complete rally. The complete rally will bring us back to around 16,000. And we've seen this happen over and over every time Bitcoin has done this bubble. So this is not what Bitcoin holders want to hear, because they just know if they hold it long enough, it'll keep going up, which is a strategy. I mean, that's a way to do it. But I still think there's some downside potential in Bitcoin. And I think there's some great opportunity when and if it has this final drop down here that it's going to put in a major bottom. So that's kind of my view. I mean, there's not a whole lot to really go at it. I'm not into the fundamentals of Bitcoin. I don't not just because it's crypto, but I'm not into fundamentals at all, period, when it comes to stocks. I am a 100% chartist, technical analyst. Just give me a chart. I can figure out where the momentum is likely to go, which way the trend is. I only trade with the underlying trends, long-term and short-term have to be combined. So, I'm not, right now I'm bearish on Bitcoin. It's in a downtrend. So that's it in a nutshell, more or less, Greg.
Yeah. And, and I love your perspective because of what you do every single day, day in and day out, tracking price action, price movement. You're tracking the flow of money every single day, trending in different assets, trending in different directions, and looking at the overall, macro scale of what is the momentum of the market with the different assets, primarily with, gold and silver and things like that, which are very comparable to how Bitcoin is going to trend.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about people, all worried about manipulation, especially in the precious metals market, and they're saying it in Bitcoin as well, or cryptos in general. And you know what? The way I see it is, people are like, "Well, how can you predict manipulation?" Well, you can't really predict manipulation, but it's worked into the price. All these price patterns. I mean, you can't predict the news either. People who trade fundamentals and news. I mean, you never know how the market's going to react to a piece of news. You never know when the news is coming out. So all that stuff, I mean, you only have to trade one bear market, invest through a bear market, buy stocks that have growing sales and they're breaking records quarter after quarter, yet their share price drops 30 or 40%. You'll be like, you know what, fundamentals, they don't really work. I mean, maybe long-term they work, but that's investing. If you just want to dump your money in and ride that chart roller coaster, I mean, and go for it. But that's not the way I see it. There's a time to be invested in Bitcoin. There's a time when you can sit back and just let it flatline. And you don't need to buy it at the bottom to be a good Bitcoin trader or a good trader at anything. You just need to know when to step back, let it do its thing, go find something else that's working and moving. When Bitcoin starts to pop up on the radar going, you know what, it looks like it's got a base, it's starting to break out, I'm getting back into it. You can move back to it. Same as the stock, same with gold. Manipulation will always happen. Usually manipulation is a blip on a chart. And usually the underlying trends will pick up. If the blip is against the trend will generally kick it back into gear. It's a usually short-lived move. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's how I look at the market. Very kind of high level, look down on it. I don't get into the nitty gritty. I don't watch the media and all that stuff. I just sit down, look at a chart, and I know right away if I want to jump in and take a position or not.
Yeah, and that's me. I'm a trend investor. I'm opportunistic, so I'm always looking for. And I did a little thing yesterday on the fundamentals of of the markets, and some of those news can move markets in a big way. Some of those news items, but at the end of the day, you have a trend, and right now you just I know there's a lot of emotion where people bought at certain levels of Bitcoin, and they're betting their future on the price action of Bitcoin. So that's where a lot of that emotion comes in, and the swings where they just don't want to see those lows. But at the end of the day, the trend is down right now, and it's a trend, and the trend will be back up. The question is, where will that trend take us ultimately? And that's the big school of thought right now. JP Morgan, I'm sure you're aware, came out with an article the other day, saying that a lot of the institutions aren't buying at this level, that they're waiting for more downside before they get in. And I think a lot of people are thinking that the institutions are buying at this level. And that's why we're kind of going sideways, because they think that we have a bottom right now in the 30-ish range, although we haven't retested the low yet. So what are your thoughts there in terms of institutional adoption, where they see the real value and their entry right now?
Yeah, I think there's mixed feelings. What's his name? Mr. Wonderful, Shark Tank
Kevin
guy.
O'Leary, yeah.
He was Kevin O'Leary. He's saying, Bitcoin won't really become popular, institutional grade. It won't have the valuation that it needs until it hits $100,000. So he said that just the other day. And then there's the other. There's the other camp, which is people are be waiting to pick it up at a drop. I mean, if you look history for Bitcoin, if it drops to 20 or 16,000. I mean, if it's done it 6 times in the past, it's got a pretty good chance it's going to happen again. What I do like about Bitcoin, which is very different than the precious metals market, is, I mean, there's a fixed number of units, and it's growing in popularity. More people are buying it. Whereas gold and silver, they can just keep mining more and more. And so there's a big difference there. I mean, Bitcoin's pretty small when you think of it in the grand scheme of the whole world wanting to pile in, hence the reason it has taken off to the values that it has. I mean, I remember watching CNBC, it must have been in 2010 or 11. Somebody came on, Maria Bartiromo was on there. They gave her a real Bitcoin, a physical Bitcoin. I think back then it was like $3 or $4 a Bitcoin. And I mean, look at it now. It's like, $60,000, or was anyway. But that's one of the reasons I think we're seeing Bitcoin continue to move up. You got these giant whales moving in, buying up Bitcoin, just holding them, accumulating on these dips, knowing that the more they own, the less float there is out there. It's going to drive them up, just like penny stocks. I mean, if somebody keeps accumulating a lot of a penny stock, there's not that many shares left. If they create hype, and I mean, people want to buy more. So that's what's going on with Bitcoin. I mean, it's definitely got that huge benefit. I love how there's a fixed amount of shares, and the whole world can trade it. It's not just like a U.S. stock that is limited to who can get involved. Anyone can buy crypto with a wallet and a credit card now. I mean, I had a cleaning lady over yesterday, and she was talking about how she just bought Bitcoin, and how her friend got her into it 2 weeks ago, and how he just bought AMC. He just bought AMC 2 days ago, on the day I posted an article saying like, hey, what goes straight up comes straight back down. Like, everyone's doing it. This is the time to bail.
Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, you can double your money both ways on that, right?
Yeah. So I like Bitcoin that way. And I think it's in a bear market, and it just needs time to heal. And I think it's probably going to have another bubble. There's nothing wrong with bubbles, especially when they repeat. I mean, they're pretty predictable. You never know where the top is going to be, and you don't know when it's going to pop. So they carry a lot of risk. But when you see a bubble starting, or you see a new uptrend, and then it goes into bubble territory, you just start selling off at levels as it goes up, locking in gains. And eventually when you see a big reversal like we saw over the last month or so, I mean, you just start to liquidate positions. So
yeah. And I think that's where it's got a lot of people fooled, is that, we didn't have that. When you look on the monthly, you have that straight up peak and blow off top. But the way this looks, if you look at it on the daily, you have that kind of rollover top. So a lot of people are, in that denial phase that this was a top, at this particular point in the cycle. And they're saying, well, if you look at some past, bull markets, there were these little corrections and then, continued. So some people are thinking in the whole scheme of things, this could just be a little correction. And then we're going to bounce, to a bigger, higher high. And, when you look at the happening, so you talked about the limited supply, there's another happening coming up in 2024, which is going to limit, the amount of new supply coming on the market. And if you look at the past happenings, you'll see a definite trend between the peak and the happening and the bull market and the happening. And I did a little something on that the other day, and it's really interesting, the effects on that. And if you look at where we're at in the cycle right now, it seems like the trend is down towards the next happening.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, Chris, I appreciate you spending a few minutes today. I enjoyed the time and your perspective, and you provided a ton of value for everybody watching. And unfortunately, I think we are in that wait and see mode right now, and maybe we can revisit here in a couple of weeks and see what's going on.
For sure. Sounds great, Greg. Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. Well, have a great day. Thanks again.
Yep. You too. Take care.